and welcome back to video 4 of the UXPin Merge series. This is video 4, and in this video we're going to design our employees portal view for tablet using MUI components. Now this view here is what we're aiming for. There's a header with a title and a hamburger menu icon, and then some information about the user, so an image, a name, a title, and email. And next we have 3 tabs that the user can click on. And when we click on each tab, the view changes so we can see the relevant content based on the tab name. As you can see, the final design doesn't have a card component or a dialogue component, so it's safe for us to delete that from our canvas. And we'll hover over both. And speaking of canvas, it should already be at the iPad size because of an earlier video. But if you've been experimenting and your canvas is a different size, now would be a good time to come over here to canvas size and set it to iPad so that we have the same canvas. Now, MUI provides some really great components in their layout category, which I've already got open here. And you can do that as well by opening up this dropdown and selecting layout. So there's box, container, grid, image list, stack, and hidden. Now, if you're familiar with web development, you may know that a go-to base layout would be a container. Now, the container in MUI serves as an optimal base layout because of its structure consistency, inherent responsiveness across devices, and seamless integration with MUI's grid system. And this provides a solid foundation for building visually cohesive and adaptable user interfaces. So let's put a container component onto our canvas, and I'll do that just by clicking on it. And it will drop a pretty inconspicuous and basically empty box onto the canvas. Now, since it's already selected, we can have a look at the properties panel on the right. So it says that the container component centers your content horizontally, which is lovely. We love some centered content, especially for a narrow screen like a tablet. So, and as always, there are a list of props here that we can work with, which are all well documented by MUI. Now, we won't see much difference in our design if we play around with it now, because there's no content yet. So we'll revisit some of these later in the process. This container will house all of the content that we want to show in this iPad view. So to make sure that it matches our example, we're going to make sure the containing content will span the width of the page going from top to bottom. So we'll drag this box up to the top and then make it match the width of the page. The next MUI component is the stack component. If you're familiar with CSS, this is basically Flexbox. It'll help us lay our components out horizontally or vertically. So let's pop one on the canvas and use it to create our header. So I'll just click on stack, and there it is. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the MUI stack component or CSS Flexbox, remember that the MUI docs are just a click away over here. The first thing I'll do here is to rename this component so I can remember what it's for. So now we'll switch over to the pages and layers panel. Now I'm going to start using a shortcut from now on because we will be switching back and forth quite a bit. So if you hover over these, you can see that blue section and it tells us what the shortcut is. So for macOS, it's option 1 and option 2. Now it may be something else for Windows, so be sure to check out what it is for you. And we'll come over here to pages and layers. Since we want the stack to be for the header, I will rename this to header stack. And we can do that by double clicking, and then we will rename header stack. Now we want all of our components to be nested inside of the container component, just like it would be in React. So let's drag our header stack into the container component. And we can do that by clicking and dragging until we have that blue highlight, and then we can drop it in. We can now see this change both in the layers panel here, but also on the canvas. The header stack is now nested under the container, and over here it's visually contained within the container on the canvas. Now let's change up the stack so it looks a bit more like what we're aiming for. We want the word portal on the left and we want the hamburger icon on the right. So let's open up this carrots and we'll delete these 3 buttons because we won't need any of them. And instead we'll use a typography component for the left for the portal, and then an icon button component for the right for the menu icon. So let's head over to Design System Libraries, and we'll use the search function to look for typography, and it won't find anything because we're just looking in layouts. Make sure you come over here and select all categories. We'll drop a typography component onto the page, and then we'll also find an icon button for the page as well, and we'll drop that in. Now let's head back to the layers panel, and we can see typography and icon button, and we'll drag both of these into the header stack. Now make sure that typography comes first because we want portal on the left, so we'll drag that until it's got that little line there. Let's change this roboto text to our actual text, which is portal. So let's click on typography or command click, and over here in children we can change that to portal. Next, let's change the home icon to the hamburger menu icon. So we'll click on this. Remember, I'm command hovering and I'm clicking on the icon, and we'll see that the icon component is selected. Now under children, we've seen this before, but we can change this to another icon. Now these are simply material icons, which we can look up quite easily. In fact, let's do that right now. We will go to fonts.google.com/icons. And there is a lot. You just have to scroll down a little bit. But luckily the one we want is right here. It's called menu. So we can go back with that knowledge. We can go to children and we'll go find the M's for menu. Where's menu? There's menu. Perfect. Great. Now we just need to push them apart so they're on the far left and on the far right of the screen. Now this is where stack does its magic. So we'll select header stack again, and I'll do it with the layers panel. And let's have a look at the props. Now some of these will look really familiar if you know CSS Flexbox. And justify content is what we want here. So we're going to change this to space between. And we can see that the two elements are now pushed aside. We also don't need this divider in the middle, so we'll come here to divider and we'll just delete that. Now, while the positioning does look really similar, the colors certainly don't match what we want. So let's make this header black and the contents white. So we'll select header stack again, and we'll change the style by supplying an SX value. Remember, this has to be JSON. So we'll do background color is black. Great, okay, and now we can't see anything. So we'll select the typography component and we'll change the color to white, which is one of the options for typography. And finally, for the icon component, we'll come here and we'll select icon. Now, while there is a color prop for this, it's not actually giving us what we want. These are the MUI color schemes, which doesn't have white. So we're going to specify that with an SX. So we'll do color, white. Nice. Now we want to give it a little bit of padding. So let's head back to header stack and we'll come here to padding and we'll give this prop a value of 10 pixels. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but they're not quite vertically aligned. So we'll also come over here to align items and we'll select center. And you can see it changed a little bit, but trust me, it changed. And finally, we want our header to span the width of the view, which is the canvas here. Now this is actually determined by the container component. So we'll come here to container and we'll select it and we will come over here to the disable gutters prop. Now this, if we toggle between them, you can see that it gives an extra bit of padding inside of the container, which we didn't want, so we'll set it to true. We'll disable the gutters. So now we've got the header down using all MUI components. Next up, let's tackle the user section that appears directly below the header element. There was a left element with the image and a right element with the text. So it makes sense to use another stack component. So let's come back to the design system and we'll look for a stack and we'll pop one right in here. And then we'll come back over here to the layers panel. We'll name this user stack, and we will make sure to drag it into the container so it will appear directly underneath. Just like before, we don't need these 3 buttons, so we will delete them. And in its place, we'll put in 2 components. The first is the image on the left. So for this, we'll use the MUI's avatar component. So let's come over here and look for avatar. The content on the right is actually 3 bits of text, so 3 typography components. So we will use a stack component there so we can lay them out nicely. So we'll come back and look for a stack, and we'll pop one of those in as well. So coming back to the layers panel, we'll make sure both of these are in the user stack with the avatar on the left-hand side. And within the stack, we'll get rid of the 3 buttons again because we won't be using the 3 buttons. And we'll rename this. We'll call this user text stack because that's what it is, right? And now that we've got that, we can head back to our MUI components and look for typography. And there's 3 of them, so I'll just add 3 to the page by clicking 3 times. And then back in layers, we can drag all 3 typography components to the user text stack. Okay, so now that we've got all the components and they're nested correctly, we'll get to work on the content and the styling. So let's set the content first. This image, when we get to developing the page in React, we'll have a picture of the user itself, but we don't have that at the moment, so we can use a placeholder. Now, what's really cool about UXPin is that you can actually provide a URL. So if we click on avatar and we come over here, the SRC attribute or SRC prop is the image URL source. I personally love using PlaceKitten, which provides a cat-related placeholder image of your desired size. So let's check out their website. We'll go to placekitten.com, and it looks like we will just have to use a URL like this. So this is the width value and this is the height value. So let's do something like that, 150 by 150. Okay, cute. Let's grab that URL and we can use it in UXPin. Okay, so select avatar, and then over here at the source prop, we'll paste that in, and we can see that there's a cat right there. Okay, and then we'll make this a little bit bigger. Now there is a sizes prop here, but it's actually not what you think it is. So this actually relates to the sizes property of an image HTML tag, and it's not what we want to make this avatar bigger. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to supply CSS styling over here in the SX prop. So we'll come to the bottom, and we don't need this background color anymore, so we'll just replace it. So we'll do width is 150 pixels, and then height is 150 pixels as well. And now it's nice and big. So now we can work on the user text stack, and I'm going to select it here. Now we know we want each line to stack vertically, so we'll change that here. So the direction will be column, like that. Now let's work on each line of text, starting with the first one. So this first one, typography, we'll change the children to the name, so we'll just use my name. Why not? Great. And then the second one is our user title. So again, we'll change the children. I'll do lead developer. And for the variant prop, we're going to change this to a H6. So it's a bit smaller. And for the final one was an email. So I'll just put rachel@portal.com. And for the variant, we'll make this a body. Now that we've got all the content in place, let's get to styling this. So first, let's get these lines of text a little bit closer to each other. So we'll select the user text stack, and over here in spacing, we'll use something a lot smaller. Let's do 2 pixels. Okay, and while we're here, let's vertically align the text to the center of the given space. So we'll change justify content to center. Nice. And as a side note, if justify content and align items don't make much sense to you, that's okay. If you want to familiarize yourself with these properties, check out MUI's interactive demo of stacks, where you can play around with these properties and see what comes out with different settings. And finally, to give everything some room, we'll add 50 pixels of padding to the user stack. So we'll select user stack, and then padding we'll give 50 pixels. Okay, and we'll actually need to center this, so it will be justify content, center. Great, now it's looking much closer to what we want, and we can move on to the tabs. So next up is the tabs. So the design pattern is called tabs, and it's also what the MUI component is called. So let's come to the design systems library and look for tabs. And we'll click that and make sure we are dragging it into the container. And that looks pretty good already. So let's make sure it is centered, which I believe is a prop. Centered, yep. And true, and that's already right there in the middle. Okay, so we'll open these up and change the label. So the label is the prop that controls the text here. So we'll change all three labels. So the first was tasks, and the second was timesheet, and the third one was request leave. Okay, and that was super easy, and that's because MUI already had these tabs patterns set up, and we were able to just grab it and use it directly in UXPin thanks to UXPin Merge. So now we'll build out the view for these three different tabs, and then we'll hook them up using interactions. Now, before we get into content, let's create another container to contain them. We can see in our original design that there's a bit of margin or gutter on the left and right of the table, which is something that we disabled in the main container. So let's create a new container within the main container to house our content. So we'll come to the design system library and we will find the container, and we'll add one of those, come back to layer, and we'll pull it into our main container. Of course, we'll rename this content container. And since we'll be hiding some of these when we switch between tabs, we're going to start with the last one. We're going to start with request leave. So as you could probably see in the example, we won't actually be building out this feature. We're going to just have an alert, a MUI alert component saying that the feature isn't ready and to email your manager instead. So we'll swap again to the design system library and look for alert. We'll add that to the page like so. And of course, we'll drag it into content container. Okay, so the alert is already selected, so we can come straight over here to the properties panel. So the alert component does come with a few different color schemes, or as MUI calls them, severity levels, and we can see that right here. So we can select from info, success, error, and warning. Now it's not so much an error that's super extreme, so we'll select warning and we get that really nice sort of orange, kind of like it's not ready yet. Okay, so now we can open up the alert component a bit more and edit the title and the typography. So I'll change the title to feature coming soon. And then the typography will change to please email your manager to submit a leave request. Now it's looking a little bit close to the tabs, so let's give some margin somewhere. Now instead of us doing that to the alert component, let's do it to the content container component. As there is no margin or spacing here, we are going to make our own using the SX. So we'll do margin top, we'll give it 50 pixels at the top, and that separates it nicely. Now, when we first load the app, the tasks tab will be selected. So we shouldn't be seeing this alert, which is for the request leave. So let's come over here to the layer panel right here. And over here, if we hover over the alert component, we can see this little hide icon, and we'll just click that and it will be hidden from the canvas. So next up, because we are working backwards, let's work on this timesheet tab. So for this, we're going to be using a MUI table component. So jump over to the library and we'll look for table and click on that to pop one in. And then as always, back in layers, we will grab and drag this into content container. Okay, now the MUI table component is a fantastic component because it's a ready-made table. It contains a ton of relevant components that make up a table. So let's explore it. Let's open up everything that we can. So table has a table head and table body, and the table head has a table row, which has a bunch of table cells, and each table cell has a typography component. And let's open up table body as well, which also has table rows, and each row has table cells. Okay, so what's great about the table component that MUI gives us is that this is already laid out for us, and we don't have to try and piece all of these child components together just to create a table that looks good. So let's change these headers into something that matches what a timesheet would have. So this first one, we'll edit the children due date. And then this next one would be clock in time. And we will do clock out time. And then this one can be the hours. And this would be status. Great, we've got our headers and we can now tackle the body. Now there are 2 table rows here that's been given to us, but we'll delete one of them so that we can change one and then sort of duplicate the other one. And for this one, we'll use command click to select the child directly, and we can change the children here. So for the first one, we can have that date, and we'll clock in at 9 a.m. We can clock out at 5 p.m. and the hours would be 8, and let's say the status is accepted. Okay, and now let's duplicate this twice, and we'll just very quickly change some aspects. We'll change this to pending, and then for this last one, we'll change it to rejected. Why not? Great, now we've got our timesheet view. And since we won't be seeing this component by default, just like the alert, we can hide it in the layers panel. And in fact, we will make everything a lot smaller and we will hide that. Finally, let's tackle the tasks. So for this, we'll be using the MUI list component. So we'll come over here to the library and look for list. And we will use this one under data display. And there's one on our canvas, and oops, I accidentally clicked it twice. And we'll drag this into content container as we did before. Now let's open this up, and we can see that just like the table component, the list component comes with a lot of child and complementary components that make up a list, a MUI list. So if you're lost, be sure to check out the MUI docs as always. Now we don't need this list subheader, so we can delete it. And we'll also just work with one list item like we did with the table row earlier. And then we'll open everything so that we can see, and it looks like there's a lot nested. Now that we've got everything open, we can see that everything's sort of nested inside this list item button. The first is the list item avatar, which contains an avatar, which contains an icon. And then we've got the list item text, which if we click on it has a primary prop and a secondary prop. And we can see these in action on the canvas as well. Now, since this is a task list, I think a checkbox component will be perfect here. So let's go to the library and look for a checkbox, and we'll add one in. And as you can see, because I had this selected, it actually added to the component. And if we come here to the layers, we can see that it has been added to the, in fact, it's been added to the list item itself. Now we can actually rearrange the layout of the list item. So if you want the checkbox on the far left, all you have to do is drag it above the avatar and you can see that it appears on the left, to the left of the avatar. But I actually like the checkbox on the right, so I will be undoing that and moving it back. Okay, so now we can duplicate the list item a few times. Now I use Command D to duplicate. And maybe something else on Windows. So now that we're here, we can change these out a little bit so that we've got 3 very different list items. So the first one, we can say, let's select the list item text. So primary would be check out the new portal. And the second one, actually we'll remove secondary text, nothing there. And the second one, we can do replace toner. And the secondary text could be for printer 2. And then the last one, let's say remove spider in kitchen. Now. Okay, and now let's play around with some of these icons. So the first one is pretty general. Let's do inbox. HIJ inbox. Okay, and the second one could be something that's kind of important, so we can do flag. So we'll come up here to the F's and do flag, if I can spell flag. There we go. And the last one is super urgent, so let's do maybe an error. So we'll come up here to E. In fact, we can actually type this in, can't we? Error, there we go, and the error icon. Okay, so we've got our list set up and we won't hide it this time because this is the default view when the app is loaded. Okay, now that we've got our 3 tab sections done, let's wire them up to the tabs themselves. Now, since we're working with UXPin Merge and we have access to the React component props, we can actually make this happen for real like it would in React. So let's dive in. So first we'll select the task tab. So I'll do that by going Command click, and we'll scroll all the way to the bottom here to click. We'll add something here. So we'll add an interaction for the click trigger. And for this, we want to make sure that the tasks are showing. So this the list is showing, but the other 2 are not. So we will make sure we show so I've clicked show here and we've got the crosshairs and we'll come over here to list. So we're going to show that and then we'll add that and we'll add a second interaction. So we're going to hide. I'm going to click hide here and we will make sure that the table is hidden. We'll do that. And then one more time we will hide and with the crosshairs we'll select the alert. Okay, so that was for our tasks tab. And we'll now do the same thing for the other 2. So I'll do this quickly. For the timesheet, we will show the table. And we will hide the list. And then one more, we will hide the alert. Whoops, we want to select the alert. Okay, so we've got 3 click ones. We've got show table, hide list, and hide alert. And for the last tab, which is our request leave, we are going to add 3 again. So when clicked, we're going to show the alert. And we'll add another one. We will hide the table. And then one more, we will hide the list. Okay. Fantastic. So now if we have a look at the prototype, we can see that if each one of these are clicked, tasks, timesheet, request leave, each one of them hide and show the correct content in our content container. And there you have it. We have designed and created this entirely with MUI components, all within UXPin, thanks to UXPin Merge. Now, all of these components, again, all of these components are actual React components, and they have state, and they behave exactly as they would in a React project. Now, in the next video, we'll explore this spec mode up here and see how we can grab the exact code that we need from UXPin and put it straight into a React project. So, I'll see you in the next video.